All right, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us for the 9th Congressional District Candidate Forum hosted by the Bloomington Young Republicans and the Monroe County Republican Party. I'm Taylor Bryant, Chairwoman of the Monroe County Republican Party, and I'll be moderating this event. It's great to be here with all of you tonight. Before we begin, there are a few ground rules we need to cover. Each candidate will be asked the same question, and we will go in alphabetical order to answer them. First, candidates will be asked to give a brief 1-minute introduction of themselves, which will be followed by 3 to 4 questions about broad topics of which each candidate has been made aware, and they will have 2 minutes to answer them. We have a candidate that must leave early due to another engagement. We appreciate her being here with us tonight and the time that we get with her. I also must ask the audience to save any applause and comments for the end, and also silence your cell phones. Please, candidates, do not speak out of turn. Due to the large number of candidates in this race, there will be no time for a rebuttal. If you'd like to rebut your fellow candidate, please use the time given to you within your allotted answer time. I will be keeping time via the iPhone right here on this table. And directly following the forum, there will be small pieces of paper on the table located by the door. We will be using that for a straw poll. So you will have 10 minutes following the event to vote for the candidate which you would support as if the election were held today. Thank you all for attending, and let's begin. So candidates, I'm going to give you each a minute to kind of just introduce yourselves. Let me get my timer pulled up, and we'll begin with Stu. Go ahead.
All right. She is before me in the alphabet, but I'm happy to go first. I'm Stu Barnes Israel. I am a U.S. Army combat veteran who fought in Afghanistan, where I earned a Bronze Star. I am a businessman. I'm the father of 2 little boys who I would not subject you to listening to tonight, so we didn't bring them. They are quite noisy. And I'm a 5th generation Hoosier, born and raised in this district, where I grew up in the church and where I learned the value of service. My mother is a pastor in our community. The church is where I learned her service. And it's that sense of service that led me to join the U.S. Army. It led me to Afghanistan, where I volunteered to lead a platoon in combat. And it's that sense of service that has led me here with you tonight, running for Congress, because our country is in serious trouble. And I'm here to say that the career politicians who got us into this mess will never be able to get us out of it. So I'm looking forward to talking about the issues.
I'm Jim Baker. I'm not a politician. I've never run for office before. I'm not backed by any PAC or special interest group. Matter of fact, in the 2016 election, I wrote something called myvoteisnotforsale.net. It's a 10-point list of how to evaluate a candidate. I'd love for you to go to that sometime. I'm a left-handed creative thinker and a problem solver with a diverse background. I'm a former principal percussionist with the Louisville Orchestra. I studied here at IU School of Music under George Gaber. I'm a former instrumental music teacher at Jeffersonville High School. I'm a composer and arranger, and I've also written 2 books, one about commercial real estate and one about being a dad and a grandfather. But most of all, the last 45 years I've worked in the 9th District, putting together thousands of deals, negotiated and closed thousands of deals within this district. I'm a conservative commercial real estate businessman, and I strongly support the values of the Republican Party. But one last thing, since I'm in a hurry, I'm a Christian, 6th generation Southern Indiana Hoosier, husband, father, grandfather, and a respecter of the rule of law. I believe that we should return to the faith and principles that were established by our founding fathers and written in our Constitution. William Penn said,
That's time.
Men must be governed or they will be ruled by...
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Dan.
Hello, my name is Dan Highway, and I'm from Seymour, Indiana. So I've been serving you for the past 20 years in the military, defending your freedom and the very air that we protect here in the United States. And I'm coming to an end in my career, and I'm heading home to Jackson County to Seymour to live and raise my daughters. And I want them to be as free as we were growing up. So what's best to be said about Dan Highway is that I am a traditional Reagan conservative federalist. You could almost think of me as a John Dutton looking kind of guy. It's very simple, and I'm very honest about it. I'm coming home to serve you in one way or another, either as a congressman or through the community doing good works, to also run for office. My goals are to make Indiana strong again. We are Hoosiers, and COVID has taken away many of our securities and our freedoms, and I want to bring that back so my daughters have a future. So, thank you.
Erin? Well, good evening, afternoon. I'm Erin Houchin. I'm a wife, a mom, a small business owner from Salem, Indiana. I've been serving in the General Assembly since 2014. I'm the only candidate in this race that has a proven record of not just supporting our conservative values, but fighting for them in the last decade. And I think we need someone in Congress that we have to do more than just take our word for it. You can look at my record and see that I've fought on the issue of life. I'm A+ rated from the NRA, the only candidate in this race to have that rating. It's the highest rating you can get. And it's because I didn't just answer the survey correctly, I didn't just vote correctly, I didn't just pass bills. I actually fought for the Second Amendment. That's what had me earn the A+ rating. I fought for life, fought for the Second Amendment. There's too much at stake not to send a proven conservative to fight for us in DC. I am that candidate. When you check my record, you'll find that is true. Again, I had served in the district as district chair and former regional director for Dan Coates. I'm looking forward to taking the fight to Washington, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you, Erin. Eric.
Eric Schonsberg, running for Congress, and married to Tanya for 26 years, 4 sons, 2 by adoption, 2 the more conventional way, active in ministry, nonprofits and the like. But the main reason I'm running is I'm an economics professor. And I've been there at IE Southeast for 30 years. If I was a biology professor, I might be able to help them with biological sex in DC. They may have a little trouble with that these days. But other than that, I wouldn't have much to offer as a biology professor. I'm an economics professor. I've thought, taught, and written about public policy, particularly at the federal level, for 30 years. 2 books on public policy, hundreds of articles, etc. So there's lots of issues bothersome about the economy these days. Gas prices, inflation, taxes and regulation, debt and spending, little things like that. And we'll talk about it more later, I'm sure. But maybe it's time to send an economics professor to DC. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Eric. Ryan.
I'm Brian Tibbs. I was a pastor for 22 years. I taught school for 7 years. During that time, the State Association of Christian Schools sent me to DC as a volunteer to urge legislators not to restrict our educational freedom at the state level. So I did that for a couple of years. I'm running to protect our freedoms and to represent you so that you don't have your social media posts blocked and locked when you try to speak your mind, so that you don't get fired from your job if your values aren't those of the woke corporation that you are working for. I want to keep you free, keep us free from mask mandates on our children as they ride school buses, and I want to work to inspire people to believe in the wonder of America, the land of the free, and that freedom is what I want to fight for. And I want to protect our young women from having to compete against biological males in women's athletics.
Thank you, Brian. We're going to get on to the first real question here, and it is, what is your top political priority, and most importantly, what do you plan to do about it? Again, Stu, we're going to give you the first answer to this, and this is a 2-minute response to this question. So whenever you're ready.
So absolutely fix the economy. We've got a lot of issues in this country. We need to fix our economy. We need to secure our border. We need to make our community safe again. We need to be strong around the world and make the world safe again, make America strong around the world again. But the first by far is fix the economy, right? And the answer here isn't that complicated, right? We need energy independence, produce more energy here at home, export U.S. energy around the world. We need to reduce deficit spending, right? Stop the career politicians who pile out of control debt on our children and our grandchildren, right? And we need to reshore U.S. manufacturing to solve the supply chain crisis we are seeing in this country, right? Deregulate and reshore U.S. manufacturing. That's how we'll fix the economy. And the answer to that isn't that hard. The real choice in this election is electing somebody who can actually get the job done, who actually knows how to get things done, who actually can fight and get things done. I fought for this country in Afghanistan, getting things done. After the Army, I went into the business world, I went and got my MBA, and I've been in the business world, in the private sector, getting things done. And we've got a real choice here, because the career politicians in this election and in Washington, D.C. clearly can't get anything done, clearly don't know how to make a budget to save their lives. The budgets that we see come out of Washington, D.C. are laughable, but our businesses have to make budgets, our Hoosier families have to make budgets. My parents met each other working at the same factory in Decatur County where I was born and raised. I worked in a factory when I was in high school before I joined the U.S. Army. And Hoosier families have to make budgets and have to live by them. Businesses have to make budgets and have to live by them. Got to make tough decisions, got to get things done. That's who we want to send to Washington, D.C. to fix our economy, which is the single biggest issue facing us right now. Ooh, nailed it.
Perfect timing. Same question to you, Jim. What is your top political priority and what are you going to do about it?
Well, I have a couple, but one of the main ones is stopping inflation and rising gas prices. But the difference between me and the other folks here, and they're all really good people, I really have been a commercial real estate businessman for 45 years. Now, Donald Trump, I'm no Donald Trump, that's for sure, is a commercial real estate businessman. And he had never run for political office before. And his policies did make America great again. And so I'd like to use some of the knowledge and some of the things that I've learned, the wisdom in what I have done to help this country. So I've actually done it. I've been the past president of the Indiana Commercial Board of Realtors. I'm also their Realtor of the Year. I was the past president of the Southern Indiana Realtor Association. And I'm the past president of Clark Regional Airport Authority Board. And I'm now served there as vice president. So I have had a lot of life experience in addition to some of the other things I said before, where I really believe I understand business. I work with industrial, office, retail, developers. I look at their balance sheets. I understand what goes on with a business and how to make money. And unfortunately, well, one of the things I thought about, wouldn't it be interesting if we had to have a balanced budget and we said to our Congress people, you don't get paid unless you balance the budget. So anyway, I am for a balanced budget and working on inflation and lowering gas prices. My signs, by the way, say, drill here, drill now, pay less. And with that, I say, don't let the Green New Deal steal the green from your wallet.
Thank you. Dan, same question to you.
Really enjoy you. Really enjoy it. Top priority. I think the best answer to that is to realize that the beginning of the recession has occurred, and we're going into that recession, which is similar to the 2008, 2009 timeframe. So while we talk about inflation, it's just begun. It's only going to continue to get worse. So is it a priority? Yes, it absolutely is, but how can we counter it? We have to look back historically at what we did previously in the last recession. You don't think we're in one, we are. It's over $100 a barrel. We crossed the death crosses on the NASDAQ, S&P, and all the indicators are there. But in economics, and Eric will tell you, it takes 2 quarters for them to make that declaration. But we know from our historical experience that we're already there. So jobs and trying to save as much money that you can put in the pocket to the people that are having dinner in your district. That is what should be the priority of whoever we send to DC, is going to be saving as many families as possible from going bankrupt, losing their families, losing their farms, losing their businesses. Small business is what this country was built on. Small business is what will save this country. Government has to get out of business. It is not their practice. If you go back to 2008, 2009, you'll see that Congress really, so that's the priority, making sure that we're taking care of the families, making sure money's in their pockets and food to weather the storm for the next 4 years until we can get the administration out. And that's the plan, is to save them and help them.
Thank you, Dan. Erin?
I don't think I'm going to be much different on this issue than some of the other candidates. I think that inflation and the economy, inflation is smothering family budgets, and we have to do something about that. I think, in Indiana, we had an Indiana first government contracting rule where we started with our Hoosier businesses. If we're going to be utilizing government contracts, we need an America First contracting policy, so the companies that are right here in the United States are supported by by our tax dollars if we are doing any type of government contracting. We have to allow small businesses to pass on their what they have built to the next generation. And right now with the inheritance tax, you're basically building everything only to give it over to the government, and that is a government taking that is absolutely unfair and not right. You know, I fought for and we achieved a balanced budget to the Indiana Constitution. We have to live within our means. The federal government must live within their means. I will fight for a balanced budget amendment. I've signed the term limits pledge. I think that's very important because we can't keep kicking the can down the road for the next generation, and we've been operating on continuing resolutions again and again. A continuing resolution is extending the budget from the previous cycle, and we've done it again and again. No one would run a business that way. I certainly don't run my business that way. So those are top priorities, but we also have to be very aware of the destruction of the family. And I certainly will be fighting to restore families as families first as well.
Thank you. Eric.
And I'm glad the first four candidates at least agreed that the economy is the most important thing. So if that's the case, and again, maybe an economics professor might be the best move here. So that's really the distinction that I have in the race. Of those issues, I think to me the debt is the biggest issue. And I'm surprised it hasn't gotten a little more attention, but I mean, the debt is really dangerous. We don't know. It could sack the economy 2-3 weeks from now or 7 months. No one knows where the cliff's at. We know we're driving in the fog. We know the knuckleheads in DC have their foot on the accelerator. They're driving towards the cliff, wherever it is, and we know that it's not sustainable. And we can't keep doing that anymore. We also know the debt is undemocratic. We know that they're voting to take the money from people from the future without giving them a vote. It's immoral, it's undemocratic, it's dangerous, it is completely unacceptable. And it's easy to blame the Democrats on this, but really, you expect Democrats to spend money. It's the GOP that I blame. For 20 years, they've been big spending. Since George Bush II through the last administration, Republican Congresses for 20 years have been spending money in a way that makes drunken sailors blush. It's completely unacceptable. We need to not just send Republicans to DC, we need to send fiscal conservatives. We need to send free market economists to DC who can make the case, not just to be a reliable vote, but to be a voice on these issues. We cannot keep doing this. The debt is the #1 issue.
Thank you, Eric. Brian.
So everything really begins and ends with oil when it comes to our economy. That's what we get our energy from to move everything. When President Biden was elected, he slapped all these regulations, the executive branch slapped regulations on our oil industry, and he said, good, the price of oil will go up and people will have to buy battery-powered cars. I don't know about you, but middle-class people like me, we don't have the money to just go out and buy a new car because President Biden thinks he wants us to. But the problem is that the executive branch can throw these regulations down on our oil industry without consulting Congress, which never voted. So I'm going to stop these regulations from being imposed on not just the oil industry, but all our businesses, which is part of the reason for the supply chain crisis and everything else that we have going on right now. These regulations by unelected bureaucrats need to come to an end. But we also need to preserve our right to speak freely. And, you know, maybe we wouldn't have President Biden if the Hunter Biden story, which was tried to be reported, had gotten press, but it was shut down by big tech. And so big tech needs to be reined in as well. We do that by saying the government can't have accounts on big tech platforms that squelch freedom of speech. And that will drive big tech back to allowing free speech of ideas. So I think those two things are critical. Stop the regulations and open up free speech for our people to speak.
Thank you, Brian. Our next question, and it's kind of piggybacking off of what Eric was talking about, and it is, what is the biggest lesson learned that the Republican Party has had in the last 20 years? And that can be local or federally. Stu.
So we're seeing failures around the world that are making America less safe. We are seeing creeping isolationism that suggests that America doesn't need to be involved around the world, right? And we're seeing the weakness that is shown be a complete disaster. And Joe Biden and this administration has leaned into that weakness. The way that we left Afghanistan was an absolute debacle, an absolute embarrassment to our country, and it has emboldened our adversaries around the world to the point that we saw Vladimir Putin invade a sovereign country in Ukraine, right? And we are seeing the effects of that around the world. It's destabilizing the world, making Hoosiers have to pay more at the pump as a result. And that kind of weakness and isolation has emboldened our adversaries in Iran, in North Korea, and in China, right? And so we need to be strong as a country and as a party and stand and remain to be the beacon of freedom and hope around the world that we've always been. Every other country, every other person in the world has always looked to America as the goal, always wanted their country to look more like America, and we need to continue to stand for that. We need to continue to be a force for good here. And again, the choice that we have in this election is somebody who can lean into these things, somebody who understands foreign policy, who understands world events. I spent, I told you, a year of my life fighting in Afghanistan. I spent 2 years training in Europe with NATO forces, training the German army, training the Polish army. I fought side by side with Polish special forces when I was in Afghanistan. And let me tell you, they're pretty capable. NATO's capable. We've spent a lot of time working with them. I also spent a year when I was in the military stationed at our southern border, where I saw the border firsthand. And we've got a lot of work to do to ensure that our country is safe and that we're a force for good around the world.
Thank you, Stu. Jim?
In the last 20 years, I've seen our country be more divisive than ever before. It seems that we've forgotten how to talk to each other. We don't listen. You know, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, but it seems like instead of what I've heard is like, you should seek to understand before you're understood. But we don't do that. We just call names, we shout, and we divide. We divide into groups, into little special interest groups here and there, but we don't talk to each other. And we're not going to get anywhere unless we do. Now, I'm not saying that we compromise on our principles. I'm a Christian. There are certain things I do not compromise when it comes to that. And there are certain things I believe as a business person that we don't compromise. But why don't we talk to each other? Why is it that, well, I tell you, one of my best friends is a former Democratic mayor of a very large city. I have lunch with him every week and we talk. But we talk as friends and we listen to each other. And he helps me understand what he's thinking. I try to let him understand what I'm thinking. And I know that's not popular in the Republican Party. For some reason, we think we got to shout all the way to the right or we're not going to be heard. But there is a reason that we need to listen and we need to talk to each other. We need to come together. That's what I think about the last 20 years. We have just stopped listening.
Thank you, Jim. Dan?
I like what you're saying, Jim. I didn't quite follow that though. But in the past 20 years, you know, running for office has been interesting because you look at the past 20 years, I got to meet Mike Sodrell, and I voted for Mike Sodrell when he ran for office. And you look at George Bush when he came in over the past 20 years as president, when he had to deal with the attack on September 11th. And the party for 20 years has had to adapt in a way that we would never have expected during Reagan or George W. or Clinton's time. And I think that is the biggest thing that's occurred that we've learned, is that it's time to continue to adapt. And the party is doing it again. This is the time, cycle similar to 94 to 96, that we are adapting, and we need to be aggressive. So what the party has learned over the past 20 years is that they cannot be passive anymore. You have to have solid leadership. We all talk about it all the time, but we need to stick to our values, our conservative views. We need to say that if we are conservative and fiscally responsible, and if we are, of course, going to be federalists, that we are that way and we hold to it. There's nothing wrong with talking and compromising, but if you go to church on Sunday, you're not just there to sing in the choir. You should actually listen to the literature and you should read the Bible. And that should be applied to your political views as well. So I think that's what's going to be the next thing for the next few years, is to see the Republicans who actually follow suit and stay to the platform and the values of the party, or the Republicans who are going to start breaking away. The Democrats have a similar problem going. You know, they had the open tent, the big tent party, and they were trying to bring in their far left. You see how that's affected them. The Republican Party had something similar with the Tea Party they brought in. And that was part of this lesson now that we're trying to see. If we don't hold on as one party, we won't be strong in the next 4 years. We won't be able to take 2024 unless we stay united. So that's part of the lesson over the past 20 years.
You can. Erin. Thank you. I'm grateful for this question in particular because it is my frustration in the Republican Party is electing candidates that say one thing during election time and they go to Indianapolis or Washington, D.C. and they do something totally different. And I can give you a few examples of that. I had an election security bill. All it did was say that if you vote by absentee, you have to prove who you say you are. And it said that only legislatures, not unelected bureaucrats, not governors, not secretary of states, only legislators can change the time, manner, and place in which we vote even during an emergency. And guess what? That bill passed the Senate and went to the House and was killed by Republicans. I had a bill for lawful carry. It did not get a hearing in the Senate under Republican leadership. So when I say in this race, it is vitally important not just to send somebody who says they're conservative, but someone who actually has fought for it. There's too much at stake. There's crime, weakness, we're projecting weakness around the globe. Our borders are porous. We cannot pay lip service to our values anymore. Republicans have to stand up for them. You don't have to take my word for it. You can look at my record. I hope you will. That's my frustration. And I think the missteps of the Republican Party over the last several years is cowering to the liberal media and not standing up for our principles. Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, I agree completely. I said before, I mean, electing Republicans is not good enough anymore. We've got to elect conservatives. We need people that are principled. We need the people that are proven. I think there's two people in the race that have a proven record. One's Erin in the legislature, and I've written for 30 years. And you can look at all the stuff I've written in all kinds of free market journals, and so I haven't put it into practice in the legislature, but my principles cannot be questioned in terms of these things. Everyone else is making promises, and they may be true to their promises, but it's always an act of faith for you all, for all voters. But there's only two people up here that have a proven record in that regard. I think the other thing, I did not answer the last question fully. So the way I would balance, and this gets to my second point, which is that I think Republicans have not been very good on rhetoric. We've let the Democrats spin circles around us. So if you all remember 25 years ago, Republicans tried to cut Medicare, and the Democrats crucified the rate of growth of spending from 8% to 7%. They weren't cutting spending, they were cutting the rate of growth of spending. It'd be like me saying, yeah, I'm gonna spend $8,000 more next year on housing, and I go, well, I'll spend $7,000 more. That's a cut. Well, no, that's not a cut. That's a cut in DC. We can't use that rhetoric. You can't use the word cut and get anything done in DC. A freeze, that gets something done, and you're not going to get crushed for the rhetoric nearly as much as the GOP did 25 years ago. If I go to DC, I'm going to sponsor a $30 minimum wage, and I'm going to call it the Let's Make It More Expensive to Hire Less Skilled People Compassion Act of 2023. And make the point, the minimum wage is terrible policy. But Republicans don't fight it. They play on defense all the time on these things. We need to be on the aggressive, be aggressive about terrible ideas. Social Security, 0% rate of return. I'll come back to that.
Thank you, Eric. Brian.
Yeah, I think the lesson I've seen from watching the Republican Party over my lifetime is the Republican Party only wins when its leaders fight, not compromise. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the first George Bush, no new taxes, read my lips, and then he compromised, and then he got crucified. And because you cannot compromise on these principles, and you cannot compromise, unfortunately, with the Democratic Party on these issues. So they're going to hate us anyway, so we might as well be bold for what we believe in. So take, for example, Governor Holcomb here in Indiana. I mean, most Hoosiers do not want, I have two female daughters who are athletes. Most Hoosiers do not want their female athletes to compete against biological males. It's not fair because we have women's athletics, not because of who women are on the inside. They're more stronger than us guys on the inside. It's because of their bodies on the outside. It requires different competition levels. And Hoosiers get that. And the legislature passed that. And Governor Holcomb vetoed it. Why? Because he's scared of the NCAA or he's scared of some other special interest group. And that's the problem with the Republican Party. I remember Ronald Reagan wasn't scared. Donald Trump wasn't scared. The Republican Party only gets its policies advanced when its leaders are not afraid. I will not be afraid to take unpopular stands that the Democrats don't like. I figure they're going to hate us Republicans anyway. Let's give them a good reason to hate us.
Thank you, Brian. This question is getting a little bit more into it here. Again, it'll be a 2-minute response, but I'll give a little bit of preface to it. We're living in a time of large amounts of government overreach. We're also living in a time of extreme polarization, especially in Congress. And we've also seen the powers of the president grow exponentially over the past 10, 15 years. Would you limit the amount of government overreach seen at our Capitol, and how would you do so? Stu.
We absolutely need to peel back the federal government from our lives. It's out of control in multiple ways. The federal government should not be telling us what to do, what to think, how to act, and the federal government certainly should not be telling us about values. I cannot figure out how we got to a place where people in Washington, D.C. and New York and California come tell Hoosiers about values. Come tell Hoosier communities and Hoosier families what their values should be anymore. It's out of control. We've got to get the federal government out of our schools, out of our lives, and out of our decision making. We as conservatives believe individual people make decisions and are responsible for them. Individual families make decisions. Individual communities make their own decisions, and individual states make their own decisions. And that is absolutely the country that we need to get back to, and the country that we need to fight for. And let me say, political rhetoric doesn't matter if you can't get things done, right? Getting things done is what matters. We need to elect somebody who can
Kids, what are we leaving behind? Somebody asked me when I first ran, they said, well, why would you want to do this? At this point in your career, you've done a lot of things. Why would you want to do this? I said, legacy. The word is legacy. And that's for all of us out here. What are you going to leave your kids? You know, what will they say about dad, grandpa, great-grandpa when you're gone? Will there be something positive? Will you leave them something in this country that was better than what was there before? That's always been my dream. And as a businessman, I haven't been on salary for 45 years. I remember times I had to mortgage my house so that I could pay mortgages so I didn't give properties back to the bank so that my tenants who weren't paying their rent to me could stay. You don't know about hard sacrifices until you've been a business owner and you've gone through those things. Until you've been a dad, until you've been a granddad, until you served in an office or you served on committees. Life is tough. And I'm a smart guy, but I don't have the answer to everything, and neither do any of you. And that's why we need collectively to come together. I've said this, Dan and I talked about this, I said, why couldn't you wouldn't it be wonderful if you said all 9 of us to Congress? We would be super Congress, okay? Because each one of us brings a different perspective, a different understanding, learning, and wisdom.
He has more to say.
Thank you, Jim.
It is.
Dan.
The question was, do we believe in limited government? Actually, like I said, I was a conservative federalist beliefs. I'm sure everyone up here understands limited government, how to do so. And I like what Mark Israel was saying about peeling it back. You have to. There's small things that have to be done. The point that Jim Baker's making, and I'm sure everyone else will make, is that it's not an easy solution. It's small pieces. We have been in a fight with 1,000 cuts, and now we're just realizing it. And so we are going to have to take time to reclaim America and reclaim our government. And that is the work, especially the gentlemen are saying, whoever goes to DC has to fight. And I know everyone up here has a fighting force behind them. You can hear from Jim, you can hear from Lawrence Israel, we all have it. Erin Houchin has a record of it, Eric has experience, everyone has it. But it's limited government is the Republican view. That is our purpose. It is in our creed. It is in a part of who you are as a Republican. That you think Americans should be free and not have oversight of a government. Now, a government is how we maintain laws and how we are peaceful and we interact with one another, and that's where the communication part that Jim was talking about comes into play. So yes, I would work to limit government. It would be until my dying day.
Thank you, Dan. Erin? Much like the other candidates, I'm for limited government and limiting our government overreach. And we also have a problem with federal and state agencies having power because legislatures and the Congress go like this. Well, we'll just give that responsibility to an agency, or we'll just give that responsibility to the governor or the president. We have to stand up for limited government, and I will fight for that as a member of Congress. I want the federal government to do as little as possible, only what the founders intended. And every day that we don't fight for that, more of our constitutional rights are at risk. But you don't have to, again, you don't have to take my word for it. I fought the vaccine mandates and we won. We pushed back against the federal government overreach into our states' policies and we won. So it's not just, again, lip service. It's actually fighting for things and achieving and standing up for it and not being afraid of the name calling or whatever it is that the left is going to throw at us, because it's too important. There's too much at stake for the future to not put the federal government squarely back in its place. Thank you, Erin. Eric?
When we talk about federal overreach, that's starts with the 10th Amendment, right? The federal government's doing a lot of things that should be state and local matters. So the two examples I like to use here are masks on school buses, local school buses. Kids had to wear masks, not because local school districts decided, but because the federal government decided for Monroe County that they would wear masks. That's asinine, right? Campaign and elections, that should be handled by the people of Indiana. It shouldn't be the federal government. It's an overreach, right? But it's really the 10th Amendment, and we blow that off. And so it is Nixon cuts to a blade. I think part of this is education. Part of it is fighting back one policy at a time. But part of it is just making the case of just asking that question. And it might be a wonderful idea, but is that the role of the federal government? The answer is almost always no. We have to ask and answer that question every time. The second category would be areas where the federal government is going to be involved, but they could sure do it a lot better and give a lot more choice. I was talking to a veteran on the way up, on the way up the drive, and talking about the lousy service he's gotten. And you're probably not going to give her to the VA, maybe a drink. It's a 0% rate of return, negative rate of return for African Americans. 15% of every dollar you earn up to a cap, even including people at the poverty line, lose $3,000 a year. We could make the case to be all over Social Security. It's not a very good program. We have to honor the promises we've made to the retirees, but we need to transition away from that system that is bankrupt, flawed, deeply taxing, terrible rate of return. We need to have the courage and the knowledge to make the case publicly on these programs. And again, Republicans haven't done that. We're just content to just kind of let it go with things like the VA and Social Security.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, it's the federal bureaucracy, these unelected people who stay in their office forever and they're not accountable to the people. Anthony Fauci's a perfect example of that. There's not another doctor in America that can fill that role that he's been in for 40 years. So I think one of the first things we need to do is we need to limit the time these people serve. A lot of them, you elect a reform-minded president, the federal bureaucracy says, well, we can just sit here and wait him out or wait her out until they're out, and we'll continue to do our thing. So I think we need to, we talk about term limits for the legislature, and I agree with that. Like Erin, I've signed that pledge, but also we need time limits for bureaucrats. Congress needs to seize back its power. And I think a practical way that could be done is to pass legislation that would give the president the authority to remove any regulation that a regulatory agency has put in place. And then that regulation could only be re-implemented if it's passed by the Congress. That way, these bureaucrats just can't legislate and do whatever they want unaccountably to the people. The president would have the authority to eliminate these regulations, and the Congress would have to vote on them. That's what our founders intended. That's a representative republic, and that's what America is all about. So I will fight to return power to the people's elected representatives.
Thank you, Brian. We are coming up good on time, so I'm going to add in a little bonus question here before we get into closing statements, and we'll have a longer meet and greet after for everyone to meet the candidates and ask their own questions to each of you. So we are here in Bloomington, where Indiana University is found. It's no secret that the Republican Party tends to lack in youth membership, and this is a huge concern when we talk about the longevity of our party. What can you do about this as our next congressperson, and why do you think this could be? Stu.
So I hear people ask about our youth a lot, right? And ask about conservative principles, what we see, what we're seeing on our campuses. And I'll tell you, from my perspective, the conservative movement is still strong in our youth. Hoosier values are still strong in our youth. I came a couple weeks ago and got to speak to the college Republicans here at Indiana University. Some of them are here tonight. Many of them helped put on this event. Our principles, our values, conservative principles are alive and well in our youth. Now, we live in a world right now where, unfortunately, values color too much of the national discussion. And again, values from New York and California, not Hoosier values, that color too much of the national discussion, right? And too many of our youth feel like they have to hide their political ideology, have to hide their values. And that's a real problem, right? And we need to continue to fight for Hoosier values here at home and continue to fight for our youth. We're seeing communities around this state under attack. I spend every day of this election traveling around the 18 counties that are in this district, talking to all members of our communities, right? Talking to our pastors, talking to our business leaders, talking to our community leaders, talking to farmers, and talking to our youth. And everybody is saying the same thing, that we need to focus on solving the problems facing Hoosiers. We gotta fix our economy, get under control so we can stop this inflation, so we have a future for our youth. We gotta secure our border to make our cities safe, to stop the drugs and crime that are flowing across the border, stop the fentanyl that is tearing our youth communities apart, and we gotta make America strong and a beacon of hope around the world again.
Thank you, Stu. Jim.
I don't know what to do about the issues in our schools and universities. I have grandkids that have recently gone here or are going here to this school, and they come away looking at things totally different than I do. I think the difference is you get married, you have kids, you start paying bills, you run a business, you see things different. And I think when you're in school here, you have an ideological point of view. Your professors kind of lean to the left and you grab onto that. But then when you come out into the real world, you find it different. So I don't know, I think only experience can teach us, or teach our children, our grandchildren, that, you know, the things on the right really do work. The things on the left, those ideological statements just don't work like they're supposed to or like they're intended. You know, Margaret Thatcher, what was she said? I love quotes, by the way, I guess you can tell. But she said, socialism is great until you run out of other people's money. And that's what we got going on in this country. We think of giveaway programs and whatever it is, and the kids in schools, they love that idea. Hey, forgive my debt, whatever. But when we get out there in the real world, we find out it's not that simple.
Thank you, Jim. Dan. Dan.
Tell them that.
I don't know. I love history. My father's a college professor of economics. That's why I really love Eric. Listening to him just talk economics, I'm like, oh, keep going. And because of that, it gives me a different view. He's a college professor and he teaches in a very Aristotle-Socratean way. He teaches economics at a doctorate level. And what he does is he makes his students get the Wall Street Journal and the Barron's. They don't get books anymore, and they have to come in and create an organized argument as an adult. Back when President Trump was in office, they'd come in and say, I don't like Trump, and I don't like his international policies, it's dumb. And he would say, okay, well, you get this first one, but after that, I'll start deducting from your grade. And so he would tell them how to properly present an argument, what they had to do, and they had to read the paper, and they had to read the Monday paper because they were in his class on Thursday. They had to bring in the paper, it had to be underlined and highlighted. Those kind of professors are far and few. Eric's one of those professors, just so you know. The professors that care. And maybe that's something that's in the area that when we're talking about education is that we have to look at is who do we really want in the classroom with our children, with our future. But your question was how would we help Bloomington? And when I was dealing with ISIS, and we were eliminating ISIS out of Iraq and Syria. We got to the Capitol, and we had to choose. And there was a paper about capitals and all these theories on what you should do and how you cordon it off or basically siege that location. There were some events that occurred, and I'll tell you, I got very emotional with it, and in the end, I just decided to flat it. So I told him, I was like, just destroy it all, kill them all. And that's what we ended up doing. And it was the only way to really beat ISIS, is just to eradicate it. When you look at Bloomington, if I was to put it in military terminology, the best way to do it is to take the outer areas as much as possible, take the outer counties and continue to build up your forces, then slowly move into Bloomington and take Bloomington over time in a siege of attrition. You can only do this properly if you invest in the next 2 generations. You're gonna need to move your headquarters out of Bloomington, and you're gonna have to make sure that you have great leadership like this young lady right here. When I first met her, she's amazing. And I hope that she stays in her position as long as she can, especially with your plan.
You're making me cut you off when you're
No,
coming.
don't. But that is the way to do it. If Brown County did it, other counties did it. If we can do that, you can do it here.
Thank you. Erin.
Well, thank you. And Taylor, your leadership is, it goes without saying, is tremendous here, and we're grateful and thank you for all that you do. I grew up in Scott County. You had to look under rocks to find Republicans there, and when you found them, they might not admit to it. Now Scott County over time has, for the first time in the last election, elected more Republicans than Democrats, more straight ticket Republican ballots than Democrat ballots. I was at IU, my senior year. I decided to do an internship in the state Senate. I really had to dig deep and understand my value set. Ultimately, I identified with the Republican Party on the issue of life, so I went for and signed up and got selected as an intern in the Indiana State Senate on the Republican ticket. I called my local party chairman in Scott County, and I said, I'd really like to join the Young Republicans, and he said, we don't have a club, but you can start one. So we did, and I'm telling you this story because it only takes one. I am one, but I am one, and I can, and if I can, I should. And I won't neglect to do the things that I can do just because I'm only one. And so my daughter, when she turned 14, she got her first job. She came home with her paycheck. She said, who the heck is FICA? And why are they taking $7 out of my check? She is maybe she's maybe farther to the right than me. She's 18, she'll be voting in her first election. She's extremely thoughtful and conservative, and it's because I believe we have had those conversations with her. So it takes those one-on-one conversations. It takes people like Taylor and Vito and others, Michael and this college Republicans, going and doing that outreach and having those conversations. And again, you're just one, but you are one. And I appreciate what you're doing. I think that is the way we can see change, is through those conversations and realizations that the Republican Party is the party of the future.
Thank you, Erin. Eric.
I agree. I can't state it more eloquently that it's really one person at a time. When I heard your question, I was thinking about IUS versus IUB, and how Bloomington is so different, and people come and go, oh, you're a college professor, yeah, it's really liberal on your campus. Well, actually, no, it's not that liberal on my campus. I think people don't understand that a regional campus of IU is fundamentally different than an IU Bloomington, right? Large research schools are really different than ones that are more community-based. So there's work to do on my campus, don't get me wrong, but it's comparing apples and rocks, basically, to compare those two populations. I think 2 challenges I would say is we have to make sure we're not more of the same. I mean, in terms of style and substance, we've been talking about how Republicans are not what they need to be. Part of this is we've emulated the style and the substance. We haven't been that different in many regards. Sometimes we're quite different, but other times not nearly as different as we could be. I think sometimes we're known for being against stuff, being more for things. We need to be positive in terms of advocating things. So, and I think that includes justice issues. When you look at this younger group, they want to be involved in the community, they want to make a difference, they want to have a legacy, and that means fighting for justice. And unfortunately, Republicans aren't particularly known for that in many areas. Sometimes we are on things like gender and other things, but a lot of times we're not. So my first book was called Poor Policy, How Government Harms the Poor. And when you talk to a Democrat about how the government harms the poor, you get their attention. When you say, hey, FICA takes $3,000 from someone at the poverty line, are you cool with that? No. Are you cool with a negative rate of return on Social Security for African Americans? No. Well, we don't make those arguments, right? So there's all kinds of stuff out there that government does to people, marginal people, all the time. And we can make that case and be really attractive, I think, to younger people who have that bent toward justice, legacy, and making a difference. And I think it starts there.
You guys are getting really good at this 2-minute thing. Ryan?
Yeah, I think part of this is cancel culture. I think young people here that do stand up are at risk of being fired or called into HR. Why did you post that on your social media account? And that silences a lot of people. I think talking is a big way that we spread conservative values. So I'm going to do what I can to limit the authority of for-profit publicly traded corporations to cancel their employees just because they speak their mind on non-work related matters outside of work. But also just teaching. And here's, I was a teacher, I was a pastor. I remember having an economics class, a high school economics class. I let them vote to make the class socialist. I said, we're going to take the grades from the kids that have extra points and give it to the kids, and everybody but one voted to make the class socialist. Within 3 weeks, when the overall grade point average of the class was crashing because the kids that worked hard didn't want to work hard anymore because their points were being, the kids said, we want to vote. I'm like, oh, you got to wait till the next election. I'm sorry about that. And I had to reassure the parents I was keeping the true scores because they were not happy. But those kids learned a lesson that socialism doesn't work. As some said, we just need to advocate these ideas. I mean, the truth is on our side. Conservatism makes sense, and we just need to persuade people. A few years ago, there was a referendum in our county to give this one business a monopoly as a casino to come in, the only one that could do gambling, and they spent $400,000 to convince our county this was a good move. I led a group. I was in charge of publicity. We spent $20,000, and we defeated them. We have a thriving downtown today because we persuaded people. And so that's one of the gifts that, by God's grace, I've been given, is to persuade people. Let's just talk, and let's persuade, and let's make the argument, because the truth is on our side.
Thank you, Brian. We are now going to get into closing statements. Everybody will have a minute to just kind of wrap things up. And then we will have, like I said, a meet and greet portion of this event. So, Stu, if you'd like to close off.
Sure. So the choice in this election is somebody who can lead, fight, and get it done, right? That is the choice in this election. Let me tell you, when I was in Afghanistan, we had a quote that's on the wall of the hut that we lived in that said, "Adversity reveals genius, and prosperity conceals it." Adversity reveals genius. It was motivating for us, and it has stayed with me through my life because our country is now facing adversity around every corner. But America has always shown its genius in times of crisis. America has always risen stronger than before. Our country is in crisis now. We have real problems, but I am wildly optimistic that we can solve it. This is fixable, and I'm here to say the career politicians who have got us into this mess will never be able to lead us out of it. We've got real work to do. Thank you for being engaged in this process. Thank you for spending your Saturday night with us. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Stu. Jim.
My wife and I went to Brooklyn the week after 9/11, and on the way there, we saw banners hung over interstate overpasses that said, "God bless America." The churches were packed. People came together, whether they were an R or a D, to fight an enemy, to help people. For some reason, we've taken God out of the conversation of America. I believe that we should return to the faith and the principles that were established by our founding fathers and that are written in our Constitution. And I'm going to give you some more quotes, like it or not. Our second president, John Adams, said this: "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And William Penn said, "Men must be governed by God, or they will be ruled by tyrants." And our currency says, "In God we trust." In our Pledge of Allegiance, we say, "One nation under God." But do we truly believe our national motto in our words? Do we really believe in God bless America? And God bless you guys. Thank you.
Dan.
Kind of missed that. I love Jim. He's awesome. You know, I get scripts all the time. They tell me what I'm supposed to say, but I don't enjoy that. So I'm going to say something different. When you talk to the candidates after this, ask them what they're gonna do if they don't win. Ask them what they're gonna do. See if they're gonna continue to serve you. They're gonna continue to help you. Even if they think they're gonna win, say, hey, what are you gonna do for this area? What are you gonna do for us? When Jim and I were having dinner, the reason we were late, our apologies, we were having dinner together. Eric was invited, he was late. I've enjoyed hanging out with the other candidates. I know it's very Reagan, very Barry Goldwater-esque. I'm sorry, that's who I am. But we talk about what we will do to continue to serve. You know, it's in us. It's in me. It's in Stu Israel. It's in all of us. It's in us because we want to continue to do good. You're here tonight because you want to do good. We're here because we love our country, love the freedom. So the question really comes down to it's not about us. It's about what we'll do for the rest of us, what we'll do together. Talk to me about it afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Erin.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Erin Houchin, proven conservative fighter. I've been fighting for this district for at least the last 20 years. I know I don't look that old. I hope not. But I have, maybe some would say is my own worst enemy, which doesn't make me friends with the establishment in Indianapolis, and it won't make me friends with the establishment in Washington, D.C., but I want to go fight for our values. I have a proven conservative record you can count on to save this country. It's not just about what we say we're going to do, it's what we've done, and I have done that. I would be grateful to have your support in this election on May 3rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erin. Eric.
I'll take the first half of my time to talk about the First Amendment. We've been dancing around it, but the First Amendment's taken a beating the last couple of years with respect to religion. It's taken a beating for 15 years with respect to free speech. And just, we do a shout out to the Second Amendment in our circles, 10th Amendment once in a while, but really the First Amendment. We used to have people back in the day who were called liberals who were like really excited about the First Amendment. Those people have sadly disappeared. So we need to be those liberals again. We need to defend the First Amendment, freedom of speech and all. I think the race, there's a lot of good candidates. Again, if you're worried about economics, and how about we go with a free market economics professor? I don't know, it seems silly to me, but it seems like the way to go. So I'd appreciate your consideration and your support, and just thankful you all came out today, and Taylor for leadership today.
Thank you, Eric. Ryan.
Taylor, thank you. Thank you to the College Republicans, Students for Life, everyone that was involved in this event today. Thank you to my other candidates. They're a great group. You know, this office we're running for is called U.S. Representative. And if you send me to Washington, that's what I will be. I will represent you. I will listen to you. I will be loyal to you. Not to the party leaders, not to the special interests, but to you. I will go to the house as a servant. And Jesus said, a servant does not stay in the house forever, and I won't. I will go, do what you send me to do, and come back so maybe one of you can go and carry on the fight. So I would be very honored if you would choose me to be your representative.
Thank you, Brian. This concludes our forum, and now we're going to transition into our meet and greet. There are a few things I want to say first before we completely conclude. If you'd like to continue to follow the Monroe County Republican Party and the Bloomington Young Republicans, you can do so on Facebook. There is the Monroe County GOP, Monroe County Republican Party of Indiana is the Republican Party Facebook page, and then the Bloomington Young Republicans is another Facebook page. We also have an upcoming Lincoln Day on April 30th at 5:30 at the Country Club. More information can be found on it at our website, which is monroecogop.com. And again, we're going to be doing a straw poll. We'll have a little bit more time to do that since we're going to have a little bit more time in the meet and greet. And again, I just want to thank all of our candidates for coming out and giving some really great responses. And hopefully that can help you as a voter determine this 9-person field that we have for our 9th congressional race. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the meet and greet. Thank you guys for coming.